Welcome back to D&D Beyond. And I promised an exciting guest. And once again, did I lie? I did
Where are
not.
they?
Please.
Where is your
They're
exciting
coming in
guest?
halfway through. You're going to love it.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Good. Yeah, nice. Thanks.
Please welcome Mark Hulmes to the stream. How you
Hello.
doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Yeah, very, very good. Lovely, sort of weird, sunny, cold day here in the UK. It's been quite nice catching up on a few things. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I like that we
Good.
get a preview. I assume that weather will transfer westward.
One
Uh,
eventually, yeah, descend over and hopefully stays the same. But yeah, no, it's been good. Yeah, just very good. Sad not to be playing D&D anymore, which I'm sure we'll get into. But glad I get to sort of chat with you, one more time about all the shenanigans we got up to. But yeah, good.
And that is with a perfect segue. You all will know Mark Humes, but if you happen to not, you have been missing out on one of the best and of the crop of public-facing DMs that this beautiful golden age of modern D&D has yielded for us. From high rollers, from Knights of Eveningstar, from guest appearances on one Critical Role, co-author of Candlekeep Mysteries, and most recently, the one and only Walter Graf from our playthrough of Unwelcome Spirits, the Wildemount adventure, just concluded here on this Twitch channel. If you want to watch
Yes.
that, there is a link to the collection that'll be going through chat or down below.
Ooh.
Mark, that's so many hats. How do you do it?
Man, I mean, when people do that, I forget all the stuff I've done. And it's kind of a nice anti-imposter syndrome thing where when other people say all the things I've done, I'm like, I did do all of those things. I have done those. That's right. I still think that they're not very good, but when people talk about them, I'm like, yay. Yeah, it's a lot of crazy stuff to go from sort of being a young man who played D&D with his friends at school and then used D&D as a way to get to know people in the games industry and like jobs and things like that. And now it is literally my life and my living, and I get to do all these super cool, awesome things. It's very, very awesome. It's very, very good, and I'm very glad of the opportunities to have and to get to do all of that cool stuff. Yeah.
Ah, I love that. And of course, over at this time, you have also made a lot of great content and ways to help other people get into D&D and DMing. So in a little bit, we are going to talk about maybe some of that advice. If you have questions from Mark, please be sending them through the chat, and we are going to collect them to answer
Yes.
some of your questions at the end of today.
Questions are good because I never know what to talk about. So questions are super helpful. Like answering questions, easy. Thinking of things to say, very hard. So
Which could actually be a good first DM tip when we get there, is they like when you're just
yes.
sitting there thinking of things. Um,
Yeah.
but before that, I would love to take a closer look at we've been doing these
Yes.
things on here. We've been looking at character sheets. So I
Mm.
would love to take a little bit of
Oh,
a closer look at a good boy, a very good boy
a
from the
sweet
Dwendalian
boy.
Empire.
Yeah, let me bring his sheet up as well, so I can remind myself because my memory is awful. So, let me bring his sheet up. But yeah, Walter, good sweet Walter Graf. Um, very fun, very very fun character to play.
So
Short
this
but
was, of course,
lovely.
this was the character you rolled up. We just did a six-parter, just mini adventure. It takes you from levels
Mm.
1 to 3, set in Wildemount. Of course, it's from the Explorer's Guide to Wildemount. It was an absolute blast and an honor to play with you. But I want to hear about why and how you rolled up this specific person. What was the general like? This is what I'm doing.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of elements right to it. The I'll get the more boring stuff out the way, which is you mentioned I think you told us that the adventure would be taking place in Jorhas, and my first instinct is I rolled up. I actually had a couple of other characters I was looking at. I was potentially going to go with a drow, a dark elf, because I know that Jorhas and the Luxon and being a big thing, and I had some cool ideas of I had a couple of ideas. One which was a Jorhasian drow who was going to be around stuff, but the other idea I had was a drow who had come from the other parts of Tal'Dorei that was still connected to Lolth and the Underdark and the more traditional drow who had heard about the Lux and had come to Wildemount to learn more about it. That was another character idea I had. But then as we were playing stuff, and so I kind of played that, but then I started thinking about it. I was like, well, the others are probably going to play a lot of Jorhas races and classes and be more embedded in it. And I thought, what if I played a character from the Dwendalian Empire, the other side of the war, that would cause a lot of problems, but that makes for fun gameplay. Like, we could kind of change things up, and I could play a. And when I made that decision, I was purposely was like, well, if I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna make them a very good, honest, just like really, just unrelentingly good. To kind of show that whilst the Empire is being seen as the enemy, and it's very easy to see the Empire as the enemy, there are lots of people who are just nice people who are getting caught up in this war, and they're not there. So that was like a little sort of more serious element to kind of take with it. But then the other side of Walter, and so I kind of leaned on that. I was like, okay, yeah, that sounds really good. And then the other two elements to it are a little bit more whimsical. One was I obviously loved playing through campaign 2 with the Critical Role guys and Liam O'Brien playing Caleb Widogast. And I was like, Liam doing that soft German accent, and hello, Caleb. And I was just like, man, like, if I'm gonna play an Empire character, I want to go with a full German accent. I want to kind of be just a human from the Empire. And yeah, getting to do like the little soft voice, and also kind of be as almost anti Caleb, where like Caleb has this tragic backstory, he's a very tortured soul. And I was like, no, I'm gonna make my guy like he's got a lovely family, he gets on with his family really well. His dad's really rich and famous, and he's just a nice guy. He's just a lovely, happy, nice guy. And so that was like another side of things, like leaning into it. And then the last element, the reason that I chose fighter and I chose the abilities and stuff that he did, that Walter has. I love combat in D&D. I actually really enjoy the combat tactical side of things. And I put out a tweet a long time ago when I was looking at doing some other D&D shows and playing a player character and stuff like that. And I asked, like, what is a sort of underrepresented race class combination, or like what do you think is underrepresented in streamed D&D shows? And one of the funny responses I got back was like people saying like human fighter. Like it's the most common class combo, like when you look at the stats, but nobody in a TTRPG stream, like, or very few people play human fighter. Or and a lot of other things like Ranger and Arcane Archer came up. So I was like, well, what if I play just a human fighter, and I make them a archer rather than being your sort of traditional tanky sword and board fighter, and then lean into eventually. I knew we wouldn't reach the third level to the end, but like eventually go into Battle Master and be a sort of kind of trick shot archer, basically like knocking weapons out of people's hands. And then thankfully you gave us the ability to take an extra feat, and so I got to take the martial adept feat, which gave me those early on. So I could kind of play around with that, because I knew that we wouldn't get the full class features from the archetype. So, and yeah, and I wanted to do that because, again, like people think of a human fighter and think boring character, and I was like, no, you can make a human fighter really fun and characterful, not just in the role play but in the stats as well. And so purposely choosing archery and choosing those little trick shots and feats and things like that was yeah, it's all kind of came together, and all of that merged together to create Volta. So yeah.
It was a joy to watch that process sort of happen, like through our discussions and our session zeros, where I'm not sure at what point you were able to sense as a DM that, like, while I love high drama, I also love the goofy.
Yeah.
I don't know if that
Yeah.
was a thing that quickly became clear, but
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. It's like one of those things where like I quickly got the vibe of like, because again, when especially when we do these streams, and this is maybe something for like folks who don't Twitch stream their D&D games, which is a weird thing. But like when you play with people that you don't know, or maybe you get this at convention games or in game store games, like you don't really know what the vibe of that party is going to be like, or you don't know what the vibe of that DM is like until you sit down and you do the session zero, or you do the first session together. And I think that as we were making the characters, and like I heard from like Michael about what he was going to be playing and stuff like that, I was like, okay, this is like 6 episodes. I think we can go a little bit more goofy, and I can just be a wholesome himbo. And rolling the stats as well helped a lot with that. I was just like, oh yeah, this guy's going to be pretty dumb, and I'm going to make him full Brendan Fraser in the Mummy himbo. And that was great. It was just a good mix, and it ended up being a fun character for the adventure that we played through, I think.
And for those who have watched it, forged a beautiful connecting chemistry with Elisa Pearl's tree kick on some
Mm,
similar shared things there. But I love, I,
that
I
was
just
great.
want to kind of flag things in you as you described your process that, like,
Mm,
uh, that are such great instincts, I think, for players, where you were looking at, you said the phrase, this can cause problems, but you looked for a way that, like, like fun problems for this
Fun
specific
problems.
campaign.
Yes.
You know, that
Yeah.
where you could have come in as like, and I will have a secret plan to murder all of them. And for some games, that would have been a good move, but
Yeah.
you could sort of quickly tell that maybe not for this game. So the
E
fun problems would
exactly.
be extra fun and extra problem if you were like a very nice boy, would
Yeah.
fish out of water.
Yep. And that creates and being the sort of the Dwendalian Empire soldier, and it's I said to you, like, if this is gonna be a problem, I can change it. But I actually think that, like, setting an adventure in a country at war with another country and playing a character from the enemy, that's a really fun challenge, not just for the player in terms of the tactics and the role play, like, "Oh, I've got to disguise myself, I've got to hide myself," but also as the GM, because I think that, and sometimes it's good for a player to challenge you as a GM. That's how you grow. That's how you get better at the art or the craft of it, really. But it's also, you know, you knew that, like, okay, well, I can use this to, like, if I need to, like, I can use this to create more complexity or to add more challenge, or I can give them, like, difficult choices that they need to make. But also I knew you as a DM would be like, I also know when to just hand wave that stuff and let them just get on with it, right? And just be like, you made a disguise check, yeah, sure, that's fine, like, you can just get on with it. Oh, you failed a bluff check, like, this NPC's suspicious of you, but they're not going to act on it right now, but it will come up later. And things like that is like, that's like a good way of doing that, right? Of setting up these kind of problems without it spilling over and affecting everybody else's fun. That was one thing I was very conscious that I didn't want to do. I wanted Walter to be, because I also knew that some of the guys in the party would be going on to do Call of the Netherdeep, which you're doing now with Eliza and Emma. So I was like, okay, well, I want my character to be somebody who can take a back seat and let those guys have the spotlight, right? And I think that that's like, when you're only going to be around a little bit, it's making a character. And what I wanted with Walter was to be a sort of an inspiration, like somebody to say, like, look, just because this country is at war with those guys doesn't mean everybody there is bad. And that hopefully leads to a lasting impression of, like, well, maybe we shouldn't judge this person, or maybe we should, we should be cautious about, like, thinking everyone's an enemy and stuff like that. And then I think that worked out really well for the last episode of Unwelcome Spirits as well, where he kind of got to say goodbye and say, look, I can do this, but I've got to stay here so you guys can kind of get away and do this kind of thing. So that was I think that was like a good way of doing it, like making sure that, like, I as a player was giving fun to the other players, as well as the GM giving fun to them as well. I think it's such a collaborative thing to be aware of, for sure.
And as much as I've leaned on the goofiness, and you did provide many very funny moments, I also loved the arc that you managed to plot out with Walter by the end to sort of make some big dramatic swings and things he was reluctant to at the beginning and willing to do at the
Yeah.
end. Um,
It's a nice easy one, right? The whole kind of, like, noble in disguise, embracing their noble name to kind of achieve something at the end of it. It's a nice, very quick, very simple trope that everybody can understand and you can actually play out in a nice kind of, like, pacing. So it worked out really well, I think.
Um, so let's look at some of the specifics on
Yeah,
Volter's
sure.
build. Obviously, we're looking at level 2 Volter and the sheet as
Mhm.
it stands. But what were the sort of, you've mentioned a couple of the building blocks that were essential here, and I'd love
Mm.
to take a moment and look at those. So we
Yeah,
got
for sure.
fighter. Why variant human?
For me, variant human it's just a little bit more interesting. Standard human, just getting the +1 to all stats, uh, can, like, sure. For me, stats aren't a big deal. I would rather have lower stats and have interesting things like more skills and more feats. Just because I think that they can mean that your character is a little bit more specialized, and I definitely wanted that with Volta. I think having a +1 to everything just makes them just sort of a bit generically better at everything. Whereas, like, a skill and a feat and a +2 gives you a bit more room to specialize and make them a bit more unique in that regard. So yeah, I wanted to go with variant human, especially to, again, kind of get that more fun things to do at level 1 as well. That's quite honestly, that's another element to it. I knew playing a fighter, I was like, man, if we get in combat, I'm going to be, I attack next turn, I attack next turn. So I purposely, like, taking the feat allowed me to take things like the martial adept, which allowed me to then be like, well, at least once per long rest I get to do a cool move. You get more skill proficiencies, that kind of thing. So, yeah.
So, and I believe you picked this before I had given everybody the free feat. So you did end up with a lovely
Mm,
combo here. Martial Adept is a
yes.
feat. Is it a general favorite or just picked out for this one?
It was a good one for this one because and again, this is a little bit of metagaming, but I think that sometimes that's okay, right? I knew that we wouldn't get Walter to level 3, and so I would never get the full Battle Master things. The idea was that this would be almost like a representing Volta that would he would eventually become a Battle Master because he had this feat from level 1. And then if I was playing Walter for longer, I would probably ask you as a DM, hey, now that I've become a Battle Master, can I swap this feat out for something else? Because that was meant to represent him sort of building up to the archetype, and then I would swap it out for something else, right? So that's like where that idea
Right.
kind of came from. And then when you gave us the bonus feat, I you kind of gave us an extra one just at level 1. I ended up taking the Piercer feat, which I didn't know very much because this was added in Xanathar's, I think. And I spotted it as I was going through, and I was looking for again something to just give me a little bit more of an edge in combat, just in case we got into a fight. And I really like the reroll damage. There's nothing more frustrating when you're playing a low level character who's only got like a +2 to like their damage roll, than rolling a 1 and being like, I deal 3 damage. So having that ability to re-roll my damage and get a bit higher was really nice. I'm very sad that I never. One of the things with the Piercer feat is if you get a crit, you deal another weapon die of damage, and so I would have loved at level 1 to be like 3d8 damage crit, and just like annihilate some monster, but it never came up, sadly. So
Although you did all collectively get through a possibly unreasonable number of things I made you do at level 1 before I gave you the level up. So,
yes,
uh,
it was so funny because it was just I remember you saying that Chris Lockey, the author, was like, "Oh wow, you guys went against the most deadly encounter in the adventure and you lived," and I was just like, "Yeah, we did it." But yeah, so that was a lot of fun, and it was really fun playing an archer fighter as well. A lot of people associate archery with the ranger, with maybe a rogue, maybe. But the nice thing with 5e is like with the battle master, with well, not just the battle master, many of the subclass features with feats, you can make a really cool archer as a fighter. And I think that's nice. I think it's nice to play around with those tropes a little bit sometimes. So,
so those were some initial building blocks. You mentioned you rolled up stats.
mm.
I'm trying to remember now. I think I told everyone that they could choose whichever version of stats they wanted.
Yeah, and I might have gone with the standard array in the end. I might
Mhm.
be like forgetting what I did because it gets kind of all muddled around. But yeah, I might have gone standard array or point by one of the two. I don't think I rolled these stats because now that I'm looking at
Okay.
them, I'm like these look suspiciously like standard array stats.
But you went con highest, then dex.
Hmm.
Dump stat
Hmm.
was intelligence, which played out rather nicely.
Yeah.
Um, and any particular reasons for arranging them that we might not have
Yeah.
covered yet?
Again, like it's a little bit I like to be quite optimal normally in my combat builds. Because I enjoy the combat side of the game when I get to play. But with Walter, I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna do that. I want to put my highest in constitution. Because I felt it represented him better having like military training, being quite athletic. I think that sometimes we always equate like strength with being like really buff and muscular, but actually, I think somebody with a really high, con and a decent dex could also have that, right? Like they would be, very athletic, able to run and climb and swim and stuff like that. And I imagine that
Endurance.
those,
Yeah.
rather than like lifting weights, Walter would like, be this person who kind of jogs and, swims and climbs as like leisure activities and things like that. So I wanted to make Constitution his highest, also with the assumption, because I think at the time we didn't know what Eliza was going to play, and I knew that it was a wizard and a rogue in the party, so I was like, well, I think I should try and have a few hit points, and fulfill that sort of tank role, right? Because I think it was a bit unclear on which way Eliza was going to go, so I was like, if I go tank, at least that's covered, and then that way somebody has some hit points, and I can just throw myself in harm's way and be like, attack me, don't hit the squishy owl wizard. So yeah, so
Which
that's why
it
I
turned
kind
out
of wanted a few more
Eliza did
content
go paladin, but we definitely needed at least two folks to stand in front of the
to
things.
get.
So thank
Yes,
goodness. Um,
yes, absolutely, yeah, and also, yeah, it's a good point as well. The idea that for me, growing up, English longbowmen, sort of, go back to sort of the Battle of 1066. English longbowmen were hench. Like these guys were really strong. They were really fit because their bows, like they have such a heavy pull that like they needed to be like really buff and worked out, and they would constantly be running around and stuff like that. So it fits that idea of an archer as well. We all think of Legolas and sort of like Vex as like these kind of like skinny elven archers, but actually I think like the idea of playing like a big beefy human archer as well is like quite fitting.
it's a great archetype that I think maybe gets underutilized in when we're
Mm.
sort of imagining out the fantasy things that, those bows are enormous and to require tremendous strength.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. And then that fed into the artwork design as well, which I'm sure we'll cover. But like when I was kind of given the tips, I was like googling like English longbowmen and like sending pictures of like these goofy looking medieval foot soldiers kind of thing. But I was like, this guy but buff. Yeah, exactly. You can see like the gambeson, the sort of tabard. And then yeah, just having like the big beefy. This was amazing, by the way, because my literal description for the character art was He-Man, Brad Pitt from Troy. So Brad Pitt is Achilles from Troy, and Brendan Fraser from The Mummy. And I was like, and then this outfit, and I just found like a bunch of like English longbowman outfits. And yeah, this
she knocked it
this
out of
is
the
what
park.
we
Our
knocked it
incredible
out of the
character
park.
art for these was by Amaoya Aguirre, who is a wonderful artist who goes by at Lila A, Lilaeh. If you want to see more of her work, which you should,
Amazing,
she
so good.
produced just incredible character designs for these.
Yeah,
I'm
amazing. I love him. Look at
not
that
sure how she
himbo.
found the
Look at
perfect
that.
eyebrows for Walter. I think it's
Yeah,
an
but
overlooked
they're perfect.
artistic thing.
Like, and their hair as well. Like, it's just like I was like, yes, that is him. That is exactly what I imagined. I love it. Sweet boy.
Now, one of the things that ended up making Vault very distinctive in play is that you had to make an awful lot of rolls for things you were not particularly optimized for, which is to say, disguising and bluffing and generally doing all that, which were
Yep.
usually catastrophic failures.
Yep.
So that
Which
was
is
very
great.
fun. Like, how did you in play sort of once that pattern was becoming quite quickly clear? What were your sort of the mental process behind
Oh,
pushing that?
joyous, wondrous. I think being a dungeon master and like not getting to play very often, but when I was younger, when I used to play in the games when I was younger, I didn't DM. I was a player for a lot of them, and my good friend, my best friend from home, Harry, used to DM, and I would die a lot. This was like an earlier edition of D&D. It was a lot more deadly, and I would die an awful lot. And I think that got me out of a good habit of I realized that losing your character or having bad things happen to your character or failing skill rolls is really just another part of the story. Like it's not a bad thing. So for me, rolling a natural one on a bluff check to convince people that you're not a Dwendalian soldier is joyous because I'm like, oh, think of all the things that Amy's now going to be able to do because of this botched roll. Um, and it's a little bit different. Like if you're in combat, obviously rolling a one, it never feels good. Like with D&D is very binary. It's like I miss, and then you're like, no, that sucks. But on things like skill checks, like ability checks, like bluff checks or like persuasion checks, or like things that are like involved in like obstacles or challenges, I love failing because I think that it actually opens up to more interesting story. So yeah, for me, I was like, I'm not going to change how I'm doing this. Like Volta's going to basically do his Thor from Ragnarok, where he's just covering his face, like this is my disguise. Um, I wasn't going to change that. I wasn't going to try and overcome that. I wanted more stuff to happen. So.
And as to spoil one small moment from the game, you gave me one of the best aliases of all time, John Killman.
Mhm. John
Mhm.
Killman. Yep. I think that wasn't even that wasn't role playing. That was Mark struggling to come up with names. I am terrible at coming up with names on the spot. As a DM, it's like my number one weakness. I'm terrible at it. Uh anybody who's watched High Rollers will know this. Like if I have to come up with a name on the fly, it throws me for a loop. And so yeah, that was just like John Killman. That's me. Like I just had nothing else.
They just really needed y'all's help, so they were just gonna go with it.
I'm just gonna go
But
with it. I love it.
I it was a gift as a DM to
Yes.
have these.
Thank you.
Let's see.
I'm
All right.
glad.
Um, so you've mentioned already, which was going to be one of my next questions. Where did you imagine Walter going over time? Let's say he lived to tier
Yes.
4. Who is this guy?
Yeah, so 100 I think that like so in terms of mechanics, Battlemaster Fighter, I don't think he would have really gone anywhere else in terms of I don't think I would have multi-classed him or anything like that. A lot of that stuff depends on the interactions. Like maybe if he got really close to Tree Kick, who's a paladin, maybe he might have been like trying to learn some stuff. I love stuff like that. I love when the campaign alters the flow of a character, and like, you take a warlock pact to save your friend, or you become a paladin because you're inspired by another party member, or an NPC that you've met. But I think in Walter's case, like, I don't know if a lot of that stuff would have happened. I could see Volta, for me, in terms of like the narrative and the mechanics, him becoming a very competent archer, kind of like a Hawkeye without the gadgets, sort of like firing sort of like arrows to disarm people, more of a Robin Hood, maybe a kind of like a Prince of Thieves Robin Hood, kind of, knocking weapons out of people's hands, pin people to like walls and tree trunks and stuff. But an idea I had with him, his father Zenon Graf is actually mentioned in the Wildemount book as one of the council members in Rexentrum. And there's a section about him where he's basically this foreign diplomat who goes and he converses with the other continents of Exandria, and he is petitioning to try and get a airship tower built in Rexentrum. And so I really like the idea that maybe Walter, having come back, realizing that this war is just a big old mess, he would probably dedicate himself to trying to put an end to the war, like try and find ways to kind of like broker peace. But in doing so, maybe kind of would get involved with like getting an airship and maybe having his own like, command of soldiers or something like that, and basically becoming like an airship captain. I can see him sort of being this not sky pirate, but kind of like officer of like an air navy, but who's a good guy. Who's basically trying to like protect everybody, not just the people of the empire, but everyone on Wildemount. I could see that. I think that would be a good high level Volta. Um,
And of course, I don't know if you want me to necessarily share this, but I believe you also let me know that if things didn't go that way for Walter, you were fine with it. Mhm.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like that fight with the lizard folk. There was a point where it was me against three of them, and I think Mogrit had come out to help, but it was like us versus three of these things. And at one point, I was on like 3 hit points, and I still had my second win left, but I was really low. And I messaged Amy because as a DM, I know this. I messaged you privately and said, just so you know, I am totally fine with you if you knock Walter down and you have one of these lizard folk make an example by like, two death saving throw, like stabbing me, I am big thumbs up for that. Like I love that stuff. And especially when you're playing a character that I knew I wouldn't be going into the Call of the Netherdeep, what a great moment that would be for the other characters. Like we were traveling with this really nice guy who was doing his best to save us, and he died. Like that's a cool thing for them to have, like for their adventure. And then it came up at the end as well, when you, again, spoilers for the series if you've not watched it, but Amy rolls a crit against this NPC that we're trying to save, like we're trying to rescue. And I am making this plea bargain, like, I still have my reaction. Would you let me jump in front of this crit? And I'll just take it. Like, you don't have to, like, I'll just take all the damage. I was at one point gonna say, like, I'll take max damage. I'll just take the maximum damage you can possibly deal. And then the dice, that you left it down to the dice, and the dice decided otherwise. But like again, for me, what a great moment that would have been. Like at the end, this Dwendalian soldier gives his life to save this goblin of Jorhas. Like that would have been a perfect thing for Volta to go out to. So yeah, I was
And
totally
that
on board.
it was a struggle because I'm so happy with how things went, but that was one of the best
Yes.
ideas and gaming impulses I have ever seen. And so for me as a DM, trying to be like, all right, what's the right way to settle this one, and going
Well,
with
you
the
made the
dice
right
and taking
call. Yeah,
it was
because
so
it would have been
fun, and it
cool
was
either way. But yeah, exactly.
so let's see. What the other thing I was going to ask about before we get to some
Yes.
questions and some D&D talk
Mm,
is you mentioned your father. Now, when you were putting together
yes.
this character, especially you know this setting well, but especially for folks who might be rolling up for the first time, they could maybe
Mm.
use some of the inspiration from what you did. Did you go shopping
Oh
for
yeah.
family?
Oh, I absolutely. I went through. I read the section about Rexentrum and the Dwendalian Empire. I read that pretty thoroughly. Like I wanted to kind of really get an idea of like what this place was like, who the movers and shakers were, and the idea of playing a soldier, at first, I wasn't going to do a noble. And then as I was reading through it, I was like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I was connected to a more, an important member of the Rexentrum family, or like the various important people in Rexentrum. And then I found Zen, and I basically was looking like, I want somebody who's pretty good. I didn't want his father to be evil or corrupt or anything like that. I wanted somebody who was a pretty good guy. but who maybe had like enemies and rivals and things like that. And Zen and Graf's a good one. He's got a rival who is also good. They're just lawful, I think, neutral and chaotic good, and they just kind of oppose each other in terms of what they want. But that was like a really good fit, and I was like, oh, this is perfect. And then it just happened to sit in well. There's nothing said about having children in his little biography bit, but I just decided, yeah, he's got 3 kids. I just was like, yeah, sure. In our game, he's got 3 kids, and Walter is one of them. So,
And it was
but
a perfect. Yeah, sorry, you were continue.
I was just going to say that I think that like doing stuff like that, if you're playing in an established setting like that, that is a great way to just get ideas of like kinds of characters, like things like maybe you're reading through something and it's like, oh, in the past there was this ancient hero who was blah 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 blah, and you can be like, oh, that's really cool. Maybe my character wants to be like them, and so they've molded themselves around them and stuff like that. Just great. Those source books have a ton of information that you can use as inspiration.
I love that the idea you can find someone and then decide like, am I connected to them, inspired by them, reacting
Are they an
against them?
enemy? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm. And I do
For
love
sure.
that. Like, I think again, you made very smart choices in terms of. We all know that out there in the world, it's not always appropriate to do a very fine people on both sides because the world is very complicated. But specifically,
Yes.
Wildemount and this conflict was designed thematically to be a sort of like neither one of
Exactly.
these is the good guy or the bad guy. So it's a beautiful opportunity for a story like this, which was just
Yeah.
well chosen as well. Mhm.
Yes.
We
Yep.
did not get
Very
through.
much
You
so.
actually like mechanically taking this concept and putting it onto the sheet involves making all
Mm.
these choices, and you made another great one because you pulled up the noble background.
Yep.
What
Perfect.
can you talk about? What did it? It gives you some things and tells you some things.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like in terms of the giving things, it was it was more because like a lot of the proficiencies are things like history and persuasion. Persuasion was a good one because I saw Walter as being not like super charismatic, but being kind of handsome and being noble, so people would listen to them. But it was more just the narrative side of things. Like I wanted him to be connected to a family. I really like the idea of like the others finding out that maybe he's quite valuable or things like that, and if maybe they would turn him in, maybe they would like hold, and I'm like, yeah, sure, go for it, that sounds awesome. And it was great the way that Michael reacted to that and the way that Michael built into that as well, like again having that knowledge of the setting, having knowledge of where and who they are, really worked in. But yeah, for me this one was very much just about Noble just was the perfect choice for the kind of character I was trying to build. So I did look at Soldier as well. Soldier would have been a really good fit, but I think Noble just gave it that little narrative push that made it a little bit more unique.
I'm endlessly charmed by the fundamental nature of D&D where all of these sort of complex character ideas find their place in expression on the sheet in the
Mm,
different places. So I just enjoy
mm.
being like, and here's where that comes in, and here's where that is, and we've got a map, and that map is a person. Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like very very quickly, one of the reasons I didn't go soldier is I realized I was like, well, soldier, a background is what you did before you became an adventurer. Walter's a young guy, like he's not been serving in the army for years and years and years. Like he's a fresh recruit. So I think that as a background, Noble was a better choice, rather than say somebody who's maybe a bit more experienced who had served as a soldier for a longer time. And then I probably could have gone soldier more. But yeah, that was just like another thought process there. I was just like, well, think about his age. Like, how does that fit in? Like, if he's level one, does soldier necessarily like really fit with the kind of vibe I'm trying to go with? So yeah,
Brilliant. And that can all be packed into a character just at level 2 in 6
yeah,
quick episodes where I was my first time I think doing 2-hour chunks of D&D, so that was kind of a learning process, but y'all got so much
yeah.
beautiful story and character in.
Well, it's a thing, right? Because like for me, I'm the same. Like 2 hours as a DM, I'm used to playing three minimum, longer. Like when I do home games and things like that. 2 hours is not a lot of time. It's really short, and to make sure that everybody gets their little moments and their spotlight, and you accomplish stuff like that's hard. It's hard to fit that stuff into 2 hours for sure.
But you all made it sing, and we had a wonderful time. So if you haven't checked it out, it's on Twitch. The collection is linked either in the description or
There we
running through
go.
chat right
Bam.
now. And Mark, it was such a joy to get to meet
Thank you.
Walter. Well,
Oh
I'm a
yeah, it was
little bit
great to play
relieved.
him.
Does go on to theoretically have some more adventures, but I was open to whatever happened.
Hey, Michael's got my number. If there's a point and call in the Nether Deep where somebody needs to show up, he's got my number, so he can always give me a call. Or maybe in the future, or if you want to put Walter in your games as a cool skyship captain flying around Wildemount, go for it.